yesterday we had a question that came the way of Abdel114. He is a good friend of the channel, great friend of the community. He asked a very specific question, and I want to share this with everyone. It was so good of a question that I think it's worthy of opening the show as a topic. And he asked this, ladies and gentlemen. One big question for you guys, of course, and this is now being focused on to the not only the panel but the chat as well. Would you trade Xbox Game Pass for exclusivity back on Xbox? Now, granted, it's a no, but I think that it's a stellar question, because one of the things that has become a very big driving conversation and a point that everyone wants to continue to make about Xbox losing, Xbox dying, Xbox going away, is Xbox going third party. Interestingly enough, and this is a stat that you can go look up right now, one of the most wish list games right now on the PlayStation 5 is not a PlayStation game, but an Xbox game in the form of Forza Horizon 5. How about them apples? Not Ghost of Yotai? That's not number one? Well, I mean, look, third-party Xbox is something I don't think I would have ever. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I'd have called you crazy. But the industry is changing. And if I've always been in the camp that if you don't move with change, you get trampled and left behind. That's just the reality of things. And this is a great question to open up the show, because honestly, there is a lot of pushback from the Xbox community. And we're talking like, I'm not saying they're dinosaurs, but they're traditionalists. They want their chocolate to be here. They want their peanut butter to be here, but God forbid you mix them. Oh no. Some people are throwing fists or temper tantrums, either or. Again, I don't like it, but I also accept it. It's kind of like that the Randy Macho Man thing from all those years ago. You may not like it, but you got to accept it, right? That's the best Macho Man I can do. But that's what he said, and that's the reality here. So I'll start first with Crispy Bomb. Again, simplistic question in nature, but I really do think that it has some thought, projecting, opinions here. Where do you kind of settle on it? Where, Game Pass versus exclusivity?
Well, at the end of the day, I think everyone in the chat and everyone listening knows that I am agnostic, and I was also a Blockbuster kid. And what Blockbuster did for me is made me realize that gaming is just a spectacular medium that I think we all need to understand that it's okay if somebody else is allowed to play games we've already played and have had in Game Pass. And I mean, right now, Game Pass is so incredible, and it's been incredible, but I think this year is really going to prove its value. And I think if you were going to trade any exclusivity at all, I would say I will trade all of the exclusivity. You can give the new games. I don't care as long as I get Game Pass. And that is really because Game Pass is the exclusive now. And, I'm sure if PlayStation allowed it and Nintendo, they would put Game Pass there, but they're not going to allow it because they're stuck in their ways. They won't see it until PlayStation right now is not looking good. Okay. So they're going to do some drastic things. What actually transpires, we don't know. But Xbox has already just opened the door and said, it's okay. We're good with it. We're competition, but we're doing the same. You're welcome to be a part of this or not. And I think that's what we're seeing on one side. Nintendo is going to be Nintendo. They're going to do what they do. Okay. Like they have laughed in the face of many companies, and they continue to be at the forefront of exclusivity. But that doesn't mean that PlayStation is going to be the same way. And I think, Xbox is just saying, you know what, we we are trying to do something that nobody else is willing to do. And that really, because they're, such a prominent force, especially on the PC market and everything now, that Game Pass is going to be the reason why you get into the Xbox ecosystem. Because I think that's where we're at now. We're not really about consoles anymore. It's about becoming a part of the Xbox ecosystem. And they're really, I think this year are going to show why you should be. And I think that's the most important thing.
It's a great point. And I think that's a point that you should drive home regarding the exclusivity aspect of it. Well, that's Xbox Game Pass. I know it's easy to say, and some people don't take it at its word, but it is ultimately the exclusive. You pay for the service. Now, that's another interesting aspect of it. How you pay for it, right? If you just pay your $20 a month, you put it to a card, and without even thinking, it charges every month, right? No big deal. If you are a savvy consumer and you are looking to, of course, count your pennies, you go to places like cdkeys.com and you get it for I just gifted somebody 6 months of Game Pass. It cost $60. It was $30 for 3 months. I'm no mathematician by any stretch of the truth, ladies and gentlemen, but what does that come out to? $10 a month, which that's fantastic. That's half price. So you're getting half price to get Avowed and South to Midnight and Call of Duty and Doom the Dark Ages and potentially the Marcus Phoenix collection. Should I keep going? Should I continue this conversation? Because at some point, you're going to have to be like, boom, you need to stop. You're killing me. There's too many games. I only have 2 freaking pair of hands. That's it. I can't go anymore. And you'd be right to say that because at some point it is ridiculous. But again, great question. I love when the community, reaches out and kind of puts a question out there that's thought-provoking. Silent Cypher, let's get your hot take on this. Again, simplistic question for sure. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate versus the old school way of gaming, which was, of course, Xbox exclusives. What do you pick?
I mean, for me, it's obvious that I would end up picking Game Pass as well because it makes more sense. I don't know. I mean, maybe some people where they're at in life, like it's the other way around, but it just, to me, it makes the most consumer sense to have something like this that I can just dip into. It's got everything that I want right there on a regular basis. And if it's not there, guess what? The Xbox store still exists. And just because it's not in the Xbox store or on Game Pass doesn't mean that I don't have this computer right in front of me. It doesn't mean that I, don't have my PlayStation over there in the other room or another Xbox or Switch or whatever upstairs. So, for me, Game Pass would be the option on that one. I think more than anything, because I feel like the exclusive thing is more than anything just people stuck in the old ways. I think it's just like the physical copies of games, right? We've talked about this before that, a lot of people are very bent on having those physical copies of the games, which
That's a great comparison, dude.
Since about like 2013, physical games have not been the same for most of the systems. Nintendo has continued to do it where most of the game is on the cartridge, but most of the time when you get these discs, it's about 90% authentication, about 5% of download of the game, and then you go online to download the actual game because the content's not on the disc, especially with the way that the industry is now. When you get these games that are on the disc, they're not complete because usually they've released a bunch of updates since they originally pressed the disc. So the discs, it's not the physical copies that we're used to anymore. It's just, it's what it is. But I think it's more than anything, we've seen it over the last year or two. It's a talking point on social media. It gives people the opportunity to say Xbox doesn't have games. And over the last little bit, we've seen that narrative flipped right on its head. And I think it's just it's one of those things. Most of the people that are very vocal about, oh, I want my exclusives, I want my exclusives. Well, then the game comes out and they never play it anyways. When it does come to the other system, like I see in the chat, and they were talking about it on Wednesday on our show about the Capcom versus fighting and stuff, right? Like that stuff started coming to Xbox. Did I see much of anything on social media about that finally releasing? No. But it sure was a mess when it originally released, and people were like, why doesn't Xbox have it? Mah! Like, there's a lot of anger and frustration about it, but then when it comes out, it doesn't get the support that we thought it was going to get, because the vocal minority is always the one that's out there really championing it nowadays. Like, for us, for savvy consumers, it makes the most sense for us to be able to play these games across the board. But more than that, it allows us to play with other people across all ecosystems, which allows us to see a higher concurrent user base, which makes the experience for us on multiplayer games especially a positive experience. May not be positive if you jump into the chats, because you will find trolls and goblins in the chats occasionally. But that's why we use private chats, right? When we're playing these games. But I mean, it doesn't negatively impact me in the slightest if someone else can play the game. I don't care. Like that doesn't keep me up at night, and it doesn't ruin my gaming experience if someone else can play the game.
It's a great point. It's a great point all around. I know people are looking for me to do a poll. Unfortunately, it is a bit of a. I'm hoping at some point that StreamYards allows for within the software to do polls. For me, I'd have to go outside of the software, go to the YouTube, and do a live stream. It's very convoluted. I hate the way that they have it that way. Apologies for not having the poll. I'm just waiting on, as a matter of fact, I've actually just recently reached out to StreamYard to see if they're going to add it. And they add stuff all the time. And I think that's one of the most requested things. But again, this is a smaller topic. And we're going to be out of here in 2 shakes of a stick. We have 2 really big monster topics to get into. But I do want to finish it off with Fuzzy Belvedere and get your hot take on it. I mean, there's something to be said about exclusivity, right? Yeah. Making people or gamers go a certain direction to your console. And obviously, I was just about to say console of choice, but maybe it's not. Maybe you're going to this console because it has these exclusives, and maybe it becomes your console of choice. Whereas something of what Xbox is doing, and listen, let's call a spade here, ladies and gentlemen. They are ahead of the curve like they've been many times before. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they don't fail. Most of the time they get the arrows, though. Like everyone's throwing stones at them. Oh my God, you mixed my peanut butter with your chocolate. How could you? My life is over. But this is a great question. Again, simplistic in nature for sure. Yeah. But I do think that there are ramifications on both sides. And I'm going to get your hot take on it. What do you choose? Do you go Game Pass Ultimate, or do you want exclusives back the way they used to be?
I'm more leaning to Game Pass at this point. Like, if you had asked me 10 years ago, the answer would probably be different. And much like you said, with them being ahead of the curve, they're always online, but yet even single player games are always online now in a lot of cases. So yeah, they're usually ahead of the curve, and they catch the slack for it and step on the brakes for Sony before they wind up doing stuff. But yeah, it's for me right now, it's not as much about the box itself as far as the console. It's the ecosystem. So while you may not have exclusive to one particular box, you do have features, which I know people don't really care about features, but when you start playing the games and actually, bounce from a portable to your laptop or to your desktop or to your console or your TV with the app on it type of thing, I think that's where those exclusives, as far as those features, things like quick resume, the smart delivery, those things are what are more important to me right now. Because, yeah, I could play the game on PlayStation, or I can play it on my PC only through Steam. But I think when it comes to Game Pass, I can actually play the game now and then pay for it later. Like, there's no more need for FOMO. You can have access to the game through Game Pass and then catch it on sale, when it's half price or 70% off or whatever the case may be. I know that may sound backwards, but if you looked at it before, there were a lot of times when I were buying games, especially when they were, $60, I'd buy it day one. And because my backlog was, just piling up, by the time I got around to playing it, it was already in Game Pass, where it was already a free games with gold or PS Plus, freebie type of thing. I know that happened with, was it Just Cause 3 and Just Cause 4 and probably with Dying Light, I played that day one, but there's so many other games like that where I held off on some game. Well, actually, I hold off more so on games now for a sale than I did before. But, with Game Pass, it gives you that flexibility. It gives you that option for like the games that never come to Game Pass. Those are the ones you can go ahead and buy day one. Have access to the other day ones in Game Pass, have the best of both worlds, and all the features within the ecosystem. To me, that's the most important thing, because honestly, you can play the games anywhere. I'm happy with the way Xbox's ecosystem is. I'm really looking forward to seeing their own handheld, so I don't have to overwrite the Steam software on my Steam Deck, or like more than likely I'll wind up getting that Legion Go at a later date. But I think right now, if they can have it where that portable plays the console games natively and the PC games, or even have access to my Steam library on that one device, that solves a lot. I wouldn't say problems, but that takes care of a lot of overlapping hardware that I can bounce between. And that could be like my go-to box. And then I have either my desktop or my console by the TV. Either one at that point would be the secondary. But yeah, the exclusives aren't as important. Like I've kind of gotten past that after the whole, not High on Life. What was the Hi-Fi Rush? Once they set that one over there, and I was like, oh, your most recent, new IP, and you give it over there, but it's like, it's not like it's taking it out of my library. It's not like I lost a feature by it going over there. I mean, sure, there was the whole controversy about the shadows, but
that came and went like the night. Honestly,
yeah.
the shadow conversation was so small. It was just people just grasping at straws for console war rhetoric. That's all that was.
And when you have to zoom in that much on a game, you're not actually playing the game or enjoying the game for what it is. It's just like, I know to some people, pixel accounting is a game itself, but so is Twitter to those same individuals. But I could care less. I rather enjoy the game where it's at and where I want it at, as far as whether it's on my phone, my Steam Deck, my console, my desktop PC, or my laptop, all of the above. And I can take it on the road. I can play on my Quest 3 while I'm on the road, stream my Xbox games there. Now you can play your own games through the service. It's even better. So to me, I rather take Game Pass than the exclusives, because there's exclusives on Sony, and I only buy Sony exclusives on that. I'm not buying third-party stuff, but I am buying the third party on my Xbox. So
yeah,
take it for what you will.
No, a great point. And for me, the obvious answer is Game Pass. Right, like, and I do like to bring this down on a fundamental, grounded kind of a level. I'm a retired guy. You guys and gals know that, right? So I have a great pension, has great insurance. It's awesome. But I say this all the time. And people, there's even somebody that in the chat. I love it. He says that his name is Boom's pension has a ceiling, and that's awesome, right? Like, but that is the truth, right? Especially in the tumultuous times that we're in right now, financially. For the planet, not just America, but the planet in a whole is going through it for a lot of reasons. And it's hard to argue. It really is hard to argue exclusivity the way it used to be, where I bought everything. So every month I was good for $300, $400, $500 a month in games. Because I'm a gamer. That's my vice. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. It's just not my bag, right? I'm home all the time, and that's my hobby. But when you consider what I just told you, that I gifted someone 6 months of Xbox Game Pass and I spent $60, how do you argue that? I get it, old men. I'm an old man too. I see you in the chat. I understand the pushback of, well, I want my exclusives. But at what cost? At what cost do you want your exclusives? Do you want the cost of lesser games being made? Do you want to see studios closed? Do you want to see people laid off? Because Sony just laid off a bunch of people. I mean, for crying out loud, the team that is making supposedly the next Killer Instinct in Iron Galaxy just let 66 people go. And you know what they said? For the life of the studio, we had to make this drastic cut of 66 humans, right? Do we want to see that? I say nay.